Welcome to Predator Radio, your exclusive podcast channel for everything predator hunting related. Predator Radio is brought to us today by our sponsor, Predator Precision. Predator Precision offers a full line of thermal and night vision optics, as well as thermal accessories. Check them out on the web at www.predatorprecision.com. Hi, and welcome back to Predator Radio. I'm your host, Jeff Turner, and we have James Bostock with us today. This is actually part 2. So if you're coming straight into this episode, please go back one episode and listen to the part 1. James has some really good stuff on calling. We try to keep these episodes to an hour, so we kind of hit our time limit, and we're rolling into episode 2 here. So, James, you're still with us, right?
Yep, I'm on this side, buddy.
All right. Thanks
again. Thanks for having me.
So, in our previous episode, we were talking about stand setup and some of those things. But you brought up a good point on fundamentals. We may have kind of skipped over some basics. I know that the guys have been doing this a while, always take these things into consideration. But since we're gearing this first season of podcasts towards newer people, can you kind of touch on the fundamental things that are just going to overall help them, and kind of some of the things to kind of always keep in mind? I know you have a certain set of things that you try to always keep in mind to increase your odds.
Heck yeah, buddy. So I think that all consistent coyote hunters or killers, basically, whether they know it or not, I think they're really paying attention to the fundamentals. And it's kind of like if you go out to the range and your grip on your gun, how tight it is in your shoulder, you might have a really good, bullet and rifle combo. It might be capable of shooting, sub half-inch groups at 100 yards. Mm-hmm. But depending on how you consistently hold and grip that rifle, pull it into your shoulder, are you following through with your trigger, those basic fundamentals are going to determine whether that's going to be a half-inch gun or not. You might be getting inch groups out of that same rifle, maybe 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches, okay, depending on how you hold that rifle. And you take two different guys and you put them on the same rifle, and they'll be hitting a different point of impact on the target at 100 yards. So one of the things that I really think is important is those fundamentals in coyote hunting. I like to call them the 3 S's. Okay. It's sight, scent, and sound. And you could be doing everything right. You could be approaching your stands correctly. You could be using the right sounds, etc. But if a fella were to break those 3 fundamentals, all of a sudden they're not getting good results. And it gets confusing because you're like, where am I going wrong? What's going on here? So I think every coyote hunter, if you're paying attention to sight, can they see you? Are you visibly apparent? If you're day hunting especially, do you blend in the shadows? Are you using kind of cover? Are you moving around? Those things, any visual cue for sight, those coyotes see it, and you're busted. I mean, right. They are particularly attuned to any kind of movement, anything that looks unnatural, just like you and I. When we look out there for coyotes, we're looking for something in a field or whatever. We're looking for that particular shape or form, and they're really good at noticing something that doesn't look right, and movement especially, any kind of movement. So a lot of times, like with sight, if you've got a decoy running, that can take their focus off of you and may give you a little bit more room to move. But when you're moving in the stand, if you're taking sight into consideration, it's like, you don't want to be breaking skyline. You don't want to be, waving your arms around or having your gun pointed way above your head and you're moving around. So anything further away from your center where you're moving is going to be moving that much more. So, you try to reduce those things as much as possible. Sound is kind of the same way. If you've got a door that squeaks when you open it up and close it, you just shut off your truck, pull the key out. Don't let it go ding, ding, ding. Make sure that key is out of there. Mm-hmm. And when you open your door, if it goes, put some WD-40 or grease on that thing, find ways to reduce any kind of noise. If you've got a sling that tings against your AR as you're walking, or your rifle, it just makes a noise, or you're wearing any kind of nylon where it's rubbing against each other as you're moving in the stand. Well, those unnatural sounds are really going to get a coyote's attention. If it's like you step on twigs, you can't help that. Other things are going to step on twigs,
Right.
but if you step and you make a really loud noise, it might be a good idea just to stop moving for a moment, wait, give it a good minute. Because if a coyote's out there and he hears a sound, he might look in that direction. So if you just stop and hold really still, he's going to lose interest at some point and go back to what he was doing. And so then you keep moving. But that's not as big an offense as if you've got some unnatural sound out there. They're going to really be attuned to it, and they can hear it long ways off. So that sound is a fundamental. And then scent is probably the biggest one that guys don't that new guys struggle with. And it's one thing that I pay attention to all the time. Like last night, my nephew and I were out. We had pretty good wind. It was starting to snowing on us. And we had these two coyotes come in, and it's night. And we got pretty cowardly coyotes here. So they wanted to get downwind of us to put their nose on what was making that sound. I was running pup panic as one of my pup sounds, and it was distress. And so they didn't want to come into it. So they weren't coming in for protection of family, but they certainly were coming in for curiosity. And they kind of circled downwind to try to get their nose on like what is going on over there, because they couldn't see us. Well, we got a new moon out. There's just no visibility out there. So the only thing they had left, since we took their sight away, was scent and sound. And we were doing our job, being quiet, setting up quietly, etc., getting the call out. And so what did they do? They circled downwind, and they were in deep brush. We couldn't get a good shot on these things. And they ended up catching our scent and started moving out. And one of the coyotes, or the male, he got into this open area between some brush, and he stopped to relieve himself. And we did a 3-second countdown, and both tapped them at 297. And but
That's awesome.
They were leaving because they got our scent. And so if a guy pays attention to those things, I think it's really critical. If you could learn all sorts of advanced calling, you could have all the best gear, you could have really good property, but if these three fundamental things are causing issues for you, it's going to drive you crazy. So
right.
If you pay attention to that, it's really important. And scent is one of those things. I'm going to take 2 seconds just to talk about this. Scent, guys think scent travels in a straight line, and it does not. I think I've even tried to explain it to guys that are experienced hunters, and they think if the wind's blowing, say, from left to right, say 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock position, well, that they think, well, then 3 o'clock is where my scent's going. Well, it's not. It's really going maybe from 1 o'clock or 1:30 all the way down to maybe 4:30.
Right.
Okay? It kind of starts widening out. That's why they call it a scent cone. It's kind of like a shape of a triangle. Yeah. But the thing is, it doesn't always travel in a straight line. It's like water. So if you've got obstacles in the way, just imagine that, there's a stream with a rock in it. And so you were to pour some colored ink or something in the water. Well, it's going to follow that current, but as soon as it hits that rock, what's it going to do? Well, it's going to go around to the right or to the left of it. Right. It's still going to keep going in the direction it's headed, but it's going to start moving and transition around things. And like if you've got a gully and the air is cool that day or that night, a cold air travels down. So if you've got a gully and your scent is going here, say to your 1:30 to 4, and there's a gully over there that cuts off and goes maybe to the 12 o'clock position, well, your scent is going to get drawn down with that cool air down into that gully, and it's going to start moving to the 12 o'clock position.
Right, absolutely.
So I think when guys are looking at scent, sight, and sound, it's just one of those really fundamental things that even after all these years of coyote hunting, I am totally aware of it on every single stand. And I think it is the critical difference to success or not. Because if we aren't following those things and really carefully on every stand, we tend to have worse results.
Yeah, I completely agree. And one of the things I tell people when we're talking about scent is, like with my background, I've been a canine cop for 23 years and own a company that trains police dogs. So for 20 years now, I've been training dogs to hunt people, whether it's search and rescue, criminal apprehension, or that type of thing. So we really get into the science of teaching a dog to find a person. And something to remember is, excuse me, odor is proportionate to source. So we get into that with drug dogs, bomb dogs, that type of thing. But it also carries over to a human. So when you have, say you're hunting a tournament that has 3 people, you want to keep in mind you're producing 3 times the amount of odor than somebody like me that usually hunts by myself. So odor is proportionate to source and is going to follow the, absent of mechanical means, the wind is going to follow the path of least resistance, just like you were talking about the ink in the river. And it's going to flow like that. So I'm kind of a firm believer in, and I think I've talked about it in a previous episode, is stacking all of the little things in your favor. So I will admit I'm not the fanatic that is big into scent lock and descenting my hunting clothes and all of that. I don't
either.
I don't have the scent free soap or anything like that I use, but I do little things. I do not put air fresheners in my truck. I don't wear cologne or anything like that, obviously, when I'm hunting. So I believe there's a happy median in everything. In scent, I know people really preach on it, but I nighttime hunt, and I take most of my stuff between 200 and 400 yards. So I'm hoping that I take stuff before it can get in close enough, because I'm, when you're out there by yourself or maybe one more person with you, you're not dropping a whole lot of odor. What do you think? I personally feel like sight and sound, you've got a lot less margin for error. I almost feel, I know people say everything revolves around scent. And I understand where they're coming from, but I really feel like if they see you or especially hear you, or like you were talking about an unnatural sound, do you agree that those things are far less forgiving?
It depends. It depends on your population. If they've got people out in yards and things like that, and are working on ranches and what have you, so they see people and they're not being shot at, well, then it's not as big a deal if you get seen. Okay, so if you're out on a ranch or something and guys are out there shoeing their horses and they're trimming their calves and tagging them and what have you. The thing is if they're seeing people out there and they're not being harassed by them, then they're not so concerned with seeing you. So it really depends on your situation. And I think a guy has to know what his environment holds and how the coyotes respond. If visually they aren't perturbed by people,
sure,
then you're probably not going to have that big a time. New coyotes, especially say pups. Okay, so you're going into fall and you got that season's litter is starting to respond to calls, etc. Sometimes they'll see a person that they don't even know what they are yet.
That's why we call them dumb pups.
They're totally, and that's why a lot of guys are killing coyotes early fall. They're cleaning out the stupid ones, so to speak. Yep. But as the season goes, they're just getting more and more educated, right? Because they've had more encounters with humans, etc. So yeah, I do think that sound and sight are two things that are going to bust you. I think what happens is a lot of guys take care of those. I think that's the kind of like the crazy thing about scent is if guys think about sound, they think about not being seen,
Right.
but they don't think about where their scent's going. So that's why I think that one is really critical to pay attention to, because it's, and the wind can roll around. That's the other really annoying thing. You know, you've been on those stands where you set up your call, you had maybe the wind, like say it's coming from the 12 o'clock position, you put out your call at the 12 o'clock and you come back and you're sitting there, you start calling, and all of a sudden you feel the wind on your left cheek.
Right.
Well, now your scent, you got to think about, okay, where did my scent go? Okay, and what areas now do I have to pay attention to? Because, you know, if a coyote gets in, your scent lingers a long time. Just because it rolled over to your left side doesn't mean that the coyote's on your six. They, you know, 15 minutes later, they're still going to, you know, have your scent, you know, where they can pick it up. Their noses are so incredible. I'll give you one beautiful example. My brother and I, we were out south of Castleford, and there's this huge haystack out there, and we got out there, and all of a sudden we had this front move in, and the wind, I'm kidding you not, it was probably 25 miles an hour with gusts up to 35, 40 miles an hour. And so we sheltered in on the side of this haystack to get out of the wind, even though we're getting some of that crap in our face. And we start calling really loud to push that sound into the wind. And we're kind of like looking at this field, say at our 12 o'clock position. Well, I always scan my 6, and I'm looking down off here to my 9 o'clock position, and there's 2 coyotes, and I can see them. They're coming along the edge of this field about 900 to 1,000 yards away. And I'm watching them, and they're coming down, coming down, and all of a sudden the lead coyote was probably 30, 40 yards in front of the secondary, and it checks up. I can see it lift its head in the air. It's probably about 700 yards at this point, and the wind's blowing like crazy. And I'm thinking, there's no way. We made no sound. We're totally in like, you can't see us. And that thing lifts its head and turns around and starts going back the way it came at a quick pace. And the other coyote it passed the other coyote, and the other coyote looks at him like, where are you going? And it keeps coming. It keeps coming to right almost to the exact same point that other coyote caught our scent, and it lifts its head, and it's gone too. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? I could not even believe it. I mean, because the wind was blowing so hard, I just thought that, you know, it's got to be pushing that scent up, or, I mean, there's no way, but they totally caught our scent, and that was that, you know. And I didn't figure we were going to bring them in anyway. They were too far out there, but the fact is that they scented us in the middle of the night, you know, a totally dark night. There's no way they heard us, and they caught our scent and left the area. It just blew my mind.
Yeah, and that kind of explains. I think you spoke earlier on the scent cone. You know, if people can kind of picture a triangle, and the top point of the triangle being the source of odor. If there's light wind, your scent cone is going to be wide and not as deep, right? And then, as you're explaining with your scent cone, with the wind picking up, your scent cone is going to be considerably more narrow. But as I said earlier, odor is proportionate to source. So you're giving off the same amount of odor regardless of what the environmental conditions or the wind is. So in the police canine world, we talk about a narrow or a wide scent cone. And it's the same thing with hunting. What you basically explained was a narrow scent cone. So the wind was blowing, and it made that triangle much more tall and skinny. But when you do that, you're pushing it out considerably further. And I think people don't really, think about that as much. That really makes sense when you talk about that and how far out they smelled that, because when the wind picks up, it narrows that scent cone down. You still have the same amount of original source odor, whether it be one or two people, and pushes it out like that. That's a neat example. Did you get that on video by chance? Were you recording when you did that?
No, it wasn't. I didn't. I had which unit was I using back then? I think we were on a handheld and using the Pulsar DFA 75.
Oh, okay.
Yep, the digital forward attachment 75. It was a nice little night vision unit, and but recording was all off external.
That would have been neat to catch.
Yeah, that was touch and go. Those days were touch and go with the external recording. Oh my goodness gracious!
Yeah.
I'd get home. I think I have some beautiful footage, and I'd plug it in and nothing.
Yeah.
And plus with the night vision, for me to get out, I don't think we didn't have anything like the Coyote Cannon back then to really broadcast light that far. So even with the recorder, we'd have never been able to see them. I could see them through thermal, but the recording unit, no chance. Yeah. But that's why I love thermal. I mean, that's, I think, really just the amount of information you can get from coyotes, their body language, how they're responding, etc. It just is invaluable. Yep. I love it. It's one of those things that I don't think I could go back to just using night vision. And I love night vision. Night vision is a beautiful technology, but the amount, just being able to see them more rapidly and identify, depending on your optic, how clear it is, and what kind of resolution you've got, and how many microns your unit's set up for. I'm using a Halo LR right now by Envision, and I don't know that I could go back to some of my older optics, because they just keep improving the technology. It's like the Trijicon units are really good. And once you've gotten accustomed to using that for detection and identification, going back to a unit where it's harder to detect and harder to identify, it's almost
hard,
impossible to do that.
I think you get.
Yeah, I warn guys, don't ever look through those scopes unless unless you're ready to be disappointed with what you own, or you're ready to purchase, because it just can kill you.
It's funny because I ran a FLIR for a long time, and I still have a couple of them. I use them as 536s. I use them as handheld scanners. But what's funny is I upgraded to a Halo LR as well. Absolutely love it. But what's funny is I'm lucky that I've got a very supportive wife of the hobby. And even though she doesn't like to shoot, she as long as it's not super cold, she loves to tag along and scan with me, and it always helps to have a second set of eyes. And with hunting 4 to 5 nights a week, I gotta tell you, I'll put my wife up against anybody when it comes to scanning and identifying what's what, because she's just put so many hours in it that she's gotten really good at it. But what's funny is she uses one of my extra 536s to scan with. Well, when I first got my Halo, before I got it, I called a buddy of mine, Branch Housley. I said, Branch, man, you're running a Halo. I just want to make sure, am I going to be happy with it? And, do you like yours? And he said, yep, you're going to like it. Don't worry about it. He said, I'll tell you now, though, when you get it, you're going to look back through that 536 and you're going to start messing with it, thinking something's wrong. Like, you're going to get into settings and mess with it because it's just not going to look right. So when I got my Halo and started running it, my wife looked through it. And I bet I had the thing for 2 or 3 days before she looked through it. If I should look through it, she's like, well, what the hell? And she looks back through hers and she's like, well, I think mine's broken. Oh. She's like, everything looks fuzzy. And before, the 536 is a great unit. I killed tons of stuff with it, and its detection range is great. It's just, it's different. And we're going to do a whole episode on thermal technology and explaining the microns and cores and resolution size, palette size, the difference between like the 12 micron units and the 17s and the 384s and the 640s. And we're going to kind of do another episode that's going to get into the meat and bones of that. But
nice.
I
think it needs to happen, because a lot of guys there's so many variables when you're looking at those thermals that really determine whether a guy is going to be happy with that unit, depending on his conditions and environment, how he hunts. And,
absolutely.
just because I'm sorry, you don't need a Halo LR to kill coyotes. I mean, I was using the old XD75A back in the day,
Yeah.
and man, that thing worked. You don't even need night vision, all you need is an optic where you can identify what you need to shoot, and shoot it, and something that holds point of impact. I mean, I think those are critical, that you got an optic that does that. But there's no doubt that a guy that loves coyote hunting and does a lot of it, and especially these night hunting, boy, the technology out there, it's really come to a point where it just provides an incredible advantage as far as identifying and detecting your game out there, and knowing the difference between a deer popping its head up over sage maybe at 150 yards versus a coyote.
Right.
You know, instead of sitting there wondering, God, is that a coyote? Is that a deer? What is that? You know, and so that gets a whole nother thing, though. That's not why we're on the phone today. But boy, I could talk about that all night too.
So one of the things I wanted to pick your brain on, and I know we touched a little bit on it earlier in the episode where we were talking about aversions and that type of thing, but I wanted to pick your brain on how to call educated coyotes, meaning basically a stand that you've been, either maybe somebody else has called there, you've called there and missed, or whatever has educated the coyote. When I say educated coyote, for listeners, if the coyote's been educated, something bad has happened and paired it with that sound, and we kind of explained that. But what we didn't get into is how to overcome that. I know with your sound packs, you have, I think it's death music. You have the slaughter pack, the carnage pack, and annihilation. Isn't that the third one? And, yep. And you have a ton of different sounds. So I'd like you to kind of touch on, I think the variety of sounds you have may have something to do with what people can use for working those educated coyotes. But can you kind of touch on how a person overcomes that?
You bet. Well, I think one of the things I hear this everywhere. Man, our coyotes are harder to hunt than anywhere else in the nation. Oh, the West is so much easier to hunt coyotes. You know, oh no, Pennsylvania, probably the hardest area to hunt. And now I'm not dogging these guys. I'm serious. There are some areas where coyotes are tough. You got more hunters out there. The more guys out there going after them, the harder it's going to be. And this industry, and just in the last decade, I've watched this go from being something that almost, I won't say nobody did, but it wasn't like it is today where everybody is out predator hunting. I think social media really has brought it to, a spotlight on it. Mm-hmm. You've got some good people out there producing videos and getting guys interested, and you got good equipment out there. And so the sport has kind of taken off. And so in the last decade, coyotes have actually gotten harder and harder to kill, or to call, I should say. I won't say to kill, but definitely to call. I've noticed a difference. It was a lot easier a decade ago for me to call in coyotes than it is now. And so I think that's really why it's important. Like, I'm always paying attention, try to refine my processes and improve things, because I think there's a couple things going on. And I know that this is kind of a long way around answering your question. But coyotes, for one, there's more guys out doing it. So what happens is they're just being educated on sounds. And that's why I still make my own sounds. I never made them for other people. I always made them for myself. It's just by happenstance that a couple guys got my sounds and went out, and they were, one was Zach Sims, out in Carolinas, and then we had Tim McCarthy up in Wisconsin, and I just happened to be BSing with them, and I shared my sounds with them, and they started using them and started getting success. And I think the thing is that it's not always that it's a good sound, although I try to produce quality sounds. I think the thing is that is it a sound those coyotes have heard or not?
Right.
Because we're triggering the same motivations. We're still trying, which we talked about in the last episode. You're trying to trigger those motivations. So if you have sounds that trigger those motivations, then you're more apt to bring those coyotes in. Okay. And if it sounds they've already heard, if everybody's running a Fox Pro in your area, man, you might pick up a lucky duck then. Get
Right.
some new sounds. Rick Pillai's got some beautiful sounds. You might grab some of Tony's sounds. There's a lot of good guys out there making sounds, and I think it's important to have good diversity, because if you're trying to get educated coyotes, the best thing you can do is not play what everybody else has been playing.
Right.
It really is really critical to success. And I will hold back sounds. I always test out my sounds. I hate to release any kind of sound that I'm not sure gets the result that I'm looking for. And if it doesn't, I come back, I rework it. I try to figure out why it's not producing, because I've got a pretty good ear for it now. I've been doing this for quite a while. But the fact is every once in a while I have some frequencies up above 20,000 hertz. And coyotes can hear way above those frequencies that we can hear. And the downside is a lot of calls, they might only play up to, like, depending on the speaker or horn they've got, they might only play up to a certain frequency, or they might play frequencies above what you can hear. So if you can't hear it, it doesn't mean a coyote can't.
Right.
And so my studio headphones here, I think they only go to 20,000 hertz. So I remember I was playing this sound, and these coyotes were not coming in. I mean, it was having a negative impact. I'm playing the sound, I'm watching them, and their body language is just all getting wiggy. And I'm like, what is going on here? And I brought that sound to rework it, and I look up in the higher frequency, about 24,000 hertz. There was some little spikes in my sound all through it, and I couldn't hear what it was. I mean, it sounded good to me. So I went and cleaned that out. I went back out in the field and played it, and sure enough, I was bringing coyotes with that sound. So, but the thing is having fresh sounds and not overplaying them. Go back to sounds you didn't use. If you got educated coyotes and you think, hey, I've never played woodpecker, try it.
Right.
If everybody's playing rabbit, the last thing you want to be doing is being out there playing rabbit, unless they're getting success on it. Okay. If it's a really hot sound right now, then play it. But the more guys playing the same rabbit sounds, the more apt you are to fire that up and have those coyotes not come in or actually leave your field. So I think it's really wise to have a diverse kind of sound list, organize it to your best of your ability, and listen to them. A lot of guys will just, and it maybe not. Sometimes you're just out there, you're like, I don't know what this sound is. I've never played it before. Try it.
Right.
I mean, all you've got to lose is a coyote, right?
Right.
So it's not a big deal. But you may find that that's a really good sound in your area. Yeah. And it's one that not a lot of guys are using. So I recommend that guys really just explore what they've got and try to broaden it as much as possible, and then get out there and see what their coyotes are responding to. And educated coyotes really are educated on the sound you're playing.
Right.
So I think that's why I keep making sounds. I really never was making them for anybody else. I just tried to add to the diversity of my call, so to speak. And then it just happened that
they were really good, and the rest of us wanted in on it.
Yes, it went off. Yeah, it went off to the left, and next thing you know, I'm selling sounds. And when I started doing this, I really only thought like maybe 5 guys that were hardcore would buy my sounds. I never planned on anything like this happening. So, but I think it just goes to show that there is a demand for good sounds, and especially the guys that are hunting a lot, that are out there really serious about coyote hunting. And it matters to them that those are the guys that sometimes they spend some crazy amount of money on sounds. Yeah. And I totally get it, because I like having as much diversity on my call as I possibly can. And those factory sounds, they just get hammered, dude. Yeah. I mean, everybody and their dog gets those sounds, so they're out playing those. So, scour the web. There's some free sounds out there, the guy that picks the most cherries is is the guy that's going to have the most cherries at the end.
Right.
So I always say, the more sounds you've got on your call, just probably the more effective you're going to be out there. As long as you don't just keep hammering the same sounds over and over and over.
All right. So I've never asked you, do you use hand calls much in your sets, or do you
You,
use them at all?
I always take one with me. So, and here's the thing, these calls are so reliable anymore
Right.
that it's almost not necessary. When I have my Fox Pro, I use an Outlaw, and there's a reason why. It's a no line of sight call. It works at really good distances. I'm out here in the West. I've got some big fields I hunt. And so, with my Fox Pro, I go set that. The most I could do is 76 paces, and I had to have a clear line of sight to that call. So either I had to put it on a tripod, get it up above the alfalfa or cheatgrass or
Yep.
sage or whatever. And it was just one more thing to carry. I got the Outlaw, and I can just go drop it in the sage out to 250, 300 yards and hit the button and it plays. But I used to always carry all my calls. I mean, I used to have a whole, a lanyard full of them around my neck when I had my Fox Pro, because I'd set that out there, and then I'd go back,
And it
set
wouldn't
up my
work.
stand, I hit the play button, and it just nothing. And I'd hit it again and nothing. And I'd just be like, oh my gosh. So now I either got to go walk back out there, reposition it, or I just start using my hand calls.
Yeah.
So, and I also like a really loud, like rabbit, personally, because if I'm hunting big open desert, with the Outlaw, it's loud enough. I mean, they've got some really good loud calls, the Shockwave, the CS24, the Lucky Duck calls. They're all loud enough anymore. I almost don't need to take them. So I only take one with me just in case my battery dies on stand.
Yeah.
I still have an option.
Gotcha. Well, the reason I was asking is I know sometimes people will switch to them with educated coyotes.
Oh yeah,
They'll switch to
great.
them, and I'm lucky enough. A lot of people have heard of JD Pyatt, who creates
Mm-hmm.
sounds for Icotech, and I he lives here close to me. We're friends, and I'm lucky enough to be able to hunt with him on a somewhat regular basis. And he's another person that's just a wealth of knowledge. But it's really cool. One of the first times I went hunting with him, I took him to one of my spots that has probably the most educated coyotes out of any of my spots. And it's one of those spots that over the past probably 3 years, I've probably killed 30, 35 coyotes out of this property. And there's
Oh
at
wow.
least another 30 in there. There's cattle around, and they just feed on the carcasses, and it's just an unending supply of coyotes. But they're really educated. It's really hard. You go in there and you call, and they just start challenge barking at you, and it's neat. So I thought, man, JD's one of the best callers that I've ever come across. So I'm gonna take him there. And it was funny. We parked and we walked back there, and I said, man, this is gonna be how I'm gonna learn how to call educated coyotes. And he ran through, I swear it was everything on his call, and he said, hold on, I got to walk back to the truck. And he goes back to the truck and gets this lanyard with a bunch of calls on it and starts going through hand calls. And we ended up not pulling anything out of there, but you could see them through the thermal start coming. Like they were so educated, they knew not to step out in the open. But I literally watched those hand calls work. Like he started doing stuff
Yeah.
that, and if you think about it, like he explained it, you can't really make this exact same sound twice. Like
Yeah.
it's different. And like you were talking about, I don't know if it tripped their curiosity or what,
Mm-hmm.
but I think sometimes if that's another solution, that if all else fails, I always carry I'm no good with diaphragms, but I can work an open reed a little bit. So I always carry a couple different open reeds and a little horn, and I've had some luck with that with educated coyotes. And I think just like you've said, if it's something different.
Yeah. I definitely concur with that. I think out here, there's a lot of guys that have pride in hand calling. They don't want to use an electronic call.
Yeah.
I think one of the disadvantages I see of hand calls for me personally is that it puts coyotes are crazy good at geolocating anything
Right.
that's making sound.
Yep.
And, and I remember one stand in particular. I put my call out. It was about 60 yards in front of me. I had a crosswind, and it was just a new moon night. There was snow on the ground, and I was running a Tony Tibby's Cottontail Candy at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I started scanning. I ran the call. I let it go quiet. I turn and look, and there's two coyotes just charging. There's snow on the ground. They're charging across this field. They're about 450 yards away. And since I'd already gone quiet, I just left it quiet because I thought, well, let's just wait until they check up, then I'll hit it again. Well, no, I watched them. They charged all the way in straight to my call, 450 yards straight to my call. One dang near ran right over it. He passed it. He turns around. He caught my scent. He starts trying to get out of there. The other one's still coming in. I mean, and it just blew me away how well they geolocate. And so that's why I typically prefer an electronic call myself, is that I can strategically set up my sound, move that sound away from me, and then it allows me to then kind of like herd my coyotes into particular shooting lanes.
Sure.
Because sometimes we only have certain lanes with sage where I've got a gap through here, and I'm thinking, okay, if I put my call here, they're gonna, if they come from this side, they're gonna want to circle around, and they're gonna have to pass through this little open gap here. I'm a bark, stop them, and shoot right there. Yep. And so I'll pick that out. But if I'm calling from where I am, then all of a sudden they're moving to a different location. So I really, a guy can do it both ways, and I do think it's really smart. Any sound that they haven't heard before, it just helps a guy. It gives them an edge in the field. So I think knowing how to use diaphragms, I really love diaphragms for the way they make pup distress, and coyote vocals are really good. I prefer that over horns and open reed or closed reed calls. As far as prey distress, I personally prefer like open reed or closed reed calls. They just sound really nice, and they're incredibly effective. So, but yeah, I think definitely you're communicating with those coyotes. That's what we're doing. You're sending out a sound. You're trying to trigger a motivator. And if you're sending something they've already heard and have an aversion to, like you were discussing earlier, well, then you've just reduced your odds of bringing in those coyotes. So anything you can do to create a fresh, new sound that is going to trigger one of those motivators, you're more apt and more likely to bring them in.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. Also, can you kind of touch on, you talked briefly about call placement and getting that sound source away from you. One thing I kind of learned that I didn't think of till partway through was placing the electronic call. Like, I would just throw the call out in the direction I wanted to shoot. I didn't necessarily, then it was explained to me that you place the call based on where you want to draw the coyote in. Can you kind of just touch real quick on placement of the call and like how you use that to draw, like you talked about a certain shooting lane and that type of thing? Because I think a lot of people think it's as simple as, throw the call upwind and
wherever,
point it wherever.
I don't do that. It's I really, whenever I set a stand, I'm always trying to determine where I want those coyotes to come, and they always surprise me. I mean, a lot of times they'll come from a totally different spot than I thought they would, but as long as I know where my shooting lanes are and I know where my scent's going, then being able to place my call gives me an advantage. And I'll hunt crosswinds. A lot of guys want to hunt with the wind right in their face. I just don't always think that's the best situation. Sometimes it is, but on a particular piece of property, a crosswind might work better. So if I'm hunting a crosswind, I'm always trying to put my call upwind of me, though. Right. Because if I'm walking across the wind, I'm spreading my scent out there. So like I'm always going to walk and place my call in the direction of the wind. And I'm always going to come into my stand based on like the wind. If I'm thinking I'm going to have coyotes coming from a particular position, I'm not going to walk across and spread my scent down in that area. So So I'm always going to drive in. There's a cool app called windy.com, and it works on Android phones and iOS phones. And it's probably the best tool I've ever used for looking at the wind direction. It is absolutely essential. I used to use an online app and just go, and it just showed every hour. It just kind of had arrows pointing where the wind's going, south, southeast, or whatever. And man, I'd get in these positions and I'd have wind circling around me, and just I'd be in a low pressure zone, and I'd have wind at my face and then wind at my back, and it was just driving me crazy. I'd drive 45 miles and hope that this area was a little better.
Right.
And so that app really is a terrific tool. But I use the wind and the knowledge of the property, and it's kind of nice getting out there and looking at that property when you're not going to hunt. It's a good idea, because then you know where those little gullies are that those coyotes might duck into and travel, and you're not going to be able to see them, and then they're going to pop up over here, and so that way, if your scent's going in a particular direction, okay, they're going to try to get down in that gully there. I know there's a gully or a little ditch or what have you. And so I think sometimes if your knowledge of the property really can give you a serious advantage when going after coyotes. But placing the call away from me, some guys I've heard like to place the call behind them. Okay, and now and I've heard guys say, well, that's just crazy. Why would you do that? Well, I'll give you a perfect example. I've got this property where this coyote, either there was a territorial issue or whatever. I'd have a tough time getting in on him. So if I left the call back closer to the fence and I walked in about 200 yards in front of my call and I started running it, he'd pop his head up. And then I just shot him in the head, But if I stayed back, he'd just pop his head up and he'd be back down, and you couldn't ever get a shot. The way the way that kind of terrain curved, it was kind of a sloping hill, and it kind of curved. And so, I knew he was back there, but I just could never get a shot on him. So I left the call behind me. I moved in forward position. I got set up, and then I started running that call. He pops his head up. I had a 45-yard shot on his head. End of the game. So there's lots of things you can do with an electronic call that I think, and that's why I really love the technology, and I prefer it over hand calls. I do use hand calls to make some of my sounds, obviously, and if I want a fresh sound, I'll pull them out. But I tend to lose those damn things in the field, honestly. When I used to take my calls out, I don't know how many hand calls and diaphragms ended up out in the field somewhere. It just drove me nuts. So now most of the time I leave them at home, just take one with me and call it good. But I think setting your call is just a matter of looking at the terrain, trying to figure out where you think your scent is going to go when you're taking that call out there, okay? Because you don't want to have your scent spread everywhere. And then what are my shooting lanes going to be? And where do I want to broadcast my sound? Because you're going to turn your speaker, your horn, in a direction where you want most of your sound to go. So if you're thinking, I want to call, I think there are coyotes maybe way out there, 800, 900 yards out in that direction, or a quarter mile or half a mile out there. Well, then I might face my horn in that direction. But I usually have it pointed away from me, not towards me, but I might move it, right or left, depending on where I want to broadcast most of my sound.
Neat. Okay. Well, that helps. What else kind of in summary for the new person getting into this? I know we covered a lot in these 2 episodes. We covered a lot of the, what motivates the coyotes to move, electronic hand calls and that type of thing. But overall, to kind of summarize, what's the short version you give to someone when they say, "Hey, I want to learn to call better. I know nothing beats experience and getting out there and trying it and watching what makes a difference. But what's the kind of tricks?" I hear some people say, call soft and stay there a while and this and that. But What's your
Mm-hmm.
general advice for the new person that wants to just call better?
Just pay attention. I think the biggest thing is pay attention to what you're doing.
Right.
Pay attention to what, I mean, because at first it's going to be really confusing to figure out, like, okay, why was this stand successful and the last four weren't? I think I was doing the same thing.
Right.
Okay. So I think it's really important first is to pay attention to everything that you're doing. Okay. And then when you have that successful stand, it could be that, you would have been successful on the other stands. It could have been that those stands were successful. You just you had coyotes territorial. So don't beat yourself up. I try to tell you guys, listen, don't beat yourself up. If you're not getting good results, stay with it. Stay tenacious. It's the guys that persevere, and they start finding their rhythm. Nobody learns to freaking dance, especially white people, the first time they hit the dance floor. It takes a while to find your groove. And so the more you do it, the more natural it becomes, the more you're going to start to see what falls into place and what works and what doesn't. And you may go like 4 hours from where you hunt and find you have to readjust your way of hunting a little bit because those coyotes respond differently. That it's not like I'm really successful with my coyotes here in this area. I know them incredibly well. So know your coyotes. Get to know them. You can't get to know them by not being out in the field though. And you've got to be out there, going after them. And the last thing I think is to say, don't overplay your sounds. Okay. Guys that just go out there and just hit the button and they play an hour straight of nonstop sounds just really have in a lot of ways probably educated those coyotes, because even after they've gone, those coyotes are probably going to come in after they've left. They're going to smell those guys' scent, and they're going to connect those two things together. And so, because a lot of guys, they have coyotes there, they just don't know they're there. I think that happens to a lot of fellas. They actually had a successful stand, they just didn't see the coyote.
Right.
They're really good at blending in.
Yeah, and that falls back to the technology you're using, and the old adage I tell people. The biggest thing I tell people is don't get discouraged. I mean, like I say, I hunt 5 nights a week, and I went the entire month of, I think it was of June or July of 2018, might have been, that I didn't put a single coyote in the truck. Like, I'm not really embarrassed to say, I didn't get anything for the whole month, and it was starting to get discouraging. So I tell people, don't get discouraged. And the other thing is, you can't call what's not there. So if you go into 2, 3, 4 stands and you're just not hearing anything or seeing anything, you can't get too discouraged, because these things move around. Like I chalk it up to there's just no coyotes here. And
and there's another thing a guy can do is, if you got some free time, go out at dusk or dawn and just drive your truck. Leave your call in your truck. You're driving from point A to point B. Look at your hunting map, find some locations that you think look good, and then just, if you're going there dusk or dawn, grab your call, get out of your truck, turn it off, and do a location howl. If sirens work in your area, run a siren. If interrogation howls tend to get response, run them. Just pull over to the side of the road, pull that horn out, crank that volume up, and hit that call, and then let it go quiet and listen.
Very good
and
point.
Then run it again. Wait a minute, run it again. Wait a minute, run it again. It takes 3 minutes to do that. And then mark anything you hear on your map. And then, you can drive another mile or two and do it again, or go to the next area, or just the next time you're out. But knowing where the coyotes are absolutely is critical. Because if they're not there, they're not there. You call to your heart's delight. It's going to be a long stand, a lot of time wasted if the coyotes aren't running there. and I always like those that have sheep or cattle. I always find coyotes near those. So when I'm out scanning, a lot of times that's where we stop. We were running this guy's property, and what we were doing was we were looking at where the cattle accumulated. And that's my nephew and we had never been down that road before. And I like to hunt those, I told you, long fields that have sage or have growth, because that's where coyotes move. And so we just set up there, and sure enough, we had two come in. And we'd never been on that property before, that particular stretch of land, but there were cattle out there. And so, just kind of pay attention to what your coyotes tend to do. And I think if the more a guy pays attention to what he's doing and where his successes are, especially, and learns the coyotes in his area, the more success he's going to have.
Well, that's awesome. That's good stuff. So in closing, Boss Predator Acoustics, Boss Death Music, how can people find you? How can they see? I know you have a list of the sounds and the sound packs on Facebook. Is it on your website as well? And I know you have a YouTube channel. How can people get a hold of you?
Oh, well, hey man, I appreciate that. Well, we've been using Facebook mainly. That's how it started. And we actually created a website, but unfortunately, I'll be straight with you. I'm not big on code. We made the website, we got a lot of work done, and then we found out that they want us to do the security. And so my host provider is requiring that. So now we're trying to port that over to another provider that does all the security in-house, because it's really important to me, if somebody's paying me money, that their information's secure, that they put in their credit card number. They don't have to worry about it getting out there. So we've got Boss, and we're going to open up two businesses, actually. I'm taking the sound money on because I love thermal and night vision. We're going to be opening up, we're going to be selling thermal and night vision and accessories, the things that I think actually, that I find advantageous to use in the field. Those are the things that I want to sell, the things that I have faith in. So right now we're a dealership for Envision. I'm trying to add Pulsar, and I'd like to add Trijicon. I really wanted to add FLIR until they pulled out of the market. So BossThermal.com is going to be where that's housed, but on Facebook, it's Boss Predator Acoustics. And, right at the top, pinned at the top is the 3-packs that I currently have out. I'll probably be adding another one this summer. I'll be coming out with some pup sounds. And then in fall, we'll be going in because, coyotes have to they got to put on fat, and they got to put on weight, and they got to grow their guard hair and get their hair thickened up. So that takes calories. So during the fall and into winter, that's when prey starts turning on pretty hot. And so we'll probably be coming out with some prey sounds then as well. And you'll see updates on that page if you're curious or interested.
Okay. And is your pricing still the same? Is it okay to throw that out there?
Heck yeah. I try to keep things, I'll be straight with you. A lot of guys are telling me, hey man, your sounds are way below what you could sell them for.
For the sound
and they
quality,
just think that
they're dirt cheap.
Undercutting
for
myself.
Good quality
What's
sounds.
that?
Yeah, the sound I think that's something I want to bring to people's attention is I know a lot of people don't buy sounds like aftermarket ones because some of them are really expensive. And some of them, the expensive ones are really good, but yours, I use them personally, so I can vouch for them because I personally have the Slaughter Pack, and I use a few of those on almost every stand. There's one called Trashy that I use quite a bit. There's a Psycho one I use quite a bit. But what I wanted to tell people is the pack I got was 24 sounds for $20. That's why I wanted to make sure the pricing was still the same. But that's less than $1 a sound. You're not going to find anywhere else good quality sounds that bring dogs in that you can kill with for less than $1 a sound. I know you got another one that's $21 for 21 sounds, so right at $1 a sound. So I encourage people to go to Boss Predator Acoustics and look at the sounds. You won't be disappointed. I know I use them, and I just wanted to throw that out there for you, that it's a good, especially for people getting started. If I tell people, if you're going to get any sound pack, at least start with yours, because it's good stuff. And I think some people may dismiss it a little bit because of the low price, and that's a complete myth. Man, they're killer sounds that
Well,
I'm
I
sure you
appreciate
could
it.
sell for
Yeah,
a lot more.
I really hate to put out duds. I make sure everything works. Because I couldn't bear to sell something to a fella if it didn't do its job. And so I'm not going to come out with, like some guys, they produce sounds and just keep cranking them out. And that's not who I am. I'm going to try to produce a fairly good pack, and I try to diversify. I do take into account what guys ask for. You're going to notice a lot of aggressive sounds in my calls, and maybe we can do another podcast on that, is how to use aggressive sounds on non-aggressive coyotes. Because a lot of guys I was talking about in the earlier podcast, how guys in Michigan said if they use anything more than an interrogation howl, they lose those coyotes. Well, there's some methodology you can use to take and use aggressive sounds and do some redirects that can really effectively bring in non-aggressive coyotes to aggressive sounds. And that's something that I do quite often. It accounts for about 33% of my kills. And
We'll definitely do
I do
another
love.
episode on that. Our
Oh, what's that?
season, we'll definitely have you on for another episode for that. Our season 1 is basic kind of introductory stuff, and then season 2, which we're going to be releasing late summer, is going to be more advanced stuff. So we would love to have you back for season 2, and this is going to go on for more seasons. We'd love to get into tap into some of your knowledge for the more advanced stuff as well.
Well, I'd be happy to come back. So I sure appreciate you having me today.
I appreciate it as well. So one more time, if, you guys need to find them on Facebook, Boss Predator Acoustics. And James, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Hey, well, thank you, Jeff, for inviting me on. And, feel free to touch base anytime. I'd be happy to help out or at least pass on kind of my thoughts. Because everybody's got a different opinion, and don't think there's any right way to call. I think guys get locked into, like this is right or this is wrong. I see that a lot on Facebook and social media.
Right. Yeah.
Is that this is the way to do it? Oh no, this is the way to do it. No, this is the way to do it. And my feeling is the way if a guy's doing it successfully, well then he's found something that works for him, and each guy is going to kind of find his own kind of zone and the things that are successful. And I think it's about just taking the pieces and parts that work for you and building on those. And, you're going to put down more coyotes.
Absolutely.
So just, I'm glad guys are listening to this stuff. I'm just really glad, you're taking time to produce, because I think it'd have been awesome to have this when I first started coyote hunting. I would have loved to have something like this.
Well, hopefully we're helping people out. James, thank you a bunch for your time. I really appreciate it.
You bet, brother. You take care.
Thanks.